Hey, it's Tom Schwab, and welcome back to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. Let me ask you a question. Are you creating a company or are you creating a category? Because if you're only focused on competing, you'll forever be stuck in someone else's sandbox. But if you're designing a new category, you're playing your own game on your own terms. In this episode, I'm joined by a man who's not only mastered the power of conversation, but he's turned community building into a growth engine for brands, for nonprofits, and for tech startups. The one and only Pablo Gonzalez. He's more than just Pablo the Connector. He's a living blueprint of what it means to evangelize a point of view and drive trust through relationships. Today, we're diving deep into how podcast interviews done right can turn curiosity into community, and how being the voice of your category isn't a marketing tactic, it's a marketing advantage. If you're ready to stop chasing leads and start leading a movement, this one's for you. So many people in so many industries know this man, right? I always say Pablo is one of those guys that couldn't get convicted in any county in the United States because you couldn't find 12 people that don't know him and love him, right? You can ask in the go-to-market, you can ask in the speaking industry, real estate, category design, right? And you'll go, do you know Pablo Gonzalez? And they'll go, Pablo the Connector? Yeah. So Pablo, I know that just didn't happen. Can you sort of pull behind the curtain? And what was your thoughts in how you've built your brand and that process that you've seen?
First of all, amazing intro. I've never really thought of like those as like my watering holes, but it makes a lot of sense. And I've never seen anybody like nail that from outside, but really cool. Anyways, Tom, awesome to be here. I look up to you. You're like a celebrity to me. It's amazing to be on this conversation. How did I build a brand around that? Man, I'm the most American person in my family, and we moved around like a couple of different continents before I was 9. And I think that at my core, that's always made me feel like someone that seeks belonging. And as I got older, you know, like as a young kid, that allowed me to kind of like get my way a lot, right? Like I know how to get in with people. And as I got older and I reached like my early 30s, I realized that what I was doing to do these things, this idea of kind of like having this like Ace Ventura shtick that always worked out for me so well had a shelf life for me. As I was starting to get on like the boards of charities and things like that, and I realized that it was best to serve with your superpower as opposed to like use it for yourself. And I had this like existential crisis of like, oh man, my core thing is that I know how to make friends. I know how to make people friends with each other, but like, there's no career for that. But I stayed very committed to it. At my brother's funeral 10 years ago, I had this like aha moment where 1,200 people showed up and I realized the value of community. And in my head, I thought, oh, okay. This Catholic church thing that I've been a part of my whole life isn't just a religion. This like parish is a community. And even though I've like tried to not be a part of this since I'm like 14, I'm never going to leave now. And at that point, it hit me that solved for churn and it was a business outcome. And then I started seeing business outcomes solved by community everywhere. So I set this like North Star goal of figuring out how to make community creation like the thing in business development that drives business results. And my early thesis was coming from what I was doing in these nonprofits of like organizing little events and reaching out to people that I wanted to know to be on the stage with me and interview them in front of the people that I already knew because they wanted to get to know each other. And I realized you just need a very small audience of curious people to get a meeting with somebody that normally wouldn't have taken a meeting with you. I then started using that as a way to do business development in my construction career. In 2017, somehow I ran into Gary Vee's content and I was like, oh, this dude's doing it at scale by recording the things that he's doing on a stage and putting it out in content. And that's when I just kind of reverse engineered the whole thing into how do you create a stage to build relationships and promote other people that then can feed this like engine of relationships and trust and marketing material that if you do it the right way by promoting others, leads to a community. And a couple years later, I read Play Bigger, realized I had the pattern kind of recognition of like, oh, all these communities need a POV, like whether it's a charity or it's, like one of these like really attractive businesses, having that bat signal around what people really care about, that problem to solve is the thing that had always worked for me in all these motions. And I've just been iterating ever since, man. I just kind of built this playbook that I have now with it.
And I love that. It's like that idea of community is the metric that matters, right? So many people would say, well, how many people do you have in your community, right? I've got, 100,000 followers, half of them are bought and bots and everything like that. That's not a community, right? Those aren't people that are going to take your call or, as you say, show up at your funeral. There's no vested interest there. And I love how you've been able to do that for different organizations, different categories, right? That strong point of view of, what's the problem we're here to solve?
Yeah, man. It's interesting how much it applies across different categories, from nonprofit to construction company to like dumpster fire e-commerce software for Amazon, like arbitrage, to $150 million real estate investing fund, to now, rising Silicon Valley funded AI startup. And it just works, man. I think what we were talking about before this is this idea that it's not about a funnel. It's not about kind of like impressions. It's really about trust, and trust is driven through a narrative and a conversation and people really being seen in the thing that you are talking about. Not, it's that old saying, right? People don't do business with people that they relate, that they understand. They do business with people that they feel understand them. And if you can wrap these narratives and these conversations in a solid point of view that is anchored in a context shift that people feel and a missing, that people long for, you now have the opportunity to introduce a solution, which is the innovation.
And I love your clarity when you talk about industry leaders are built, not bought, because I think that's the idea that, I'll just buy these ads or buy these followers or buy these impressions and do it that way. And it's like, you may get the attention, but you're not going to get the trust, right? People aren't going to work with you. And I think also, some of those people are fast up, fast down. The people that are there as the true industry leaders, the category kings and queens, they're the ones that have been slugging it out. And all of a sudden, after 10 years, they're the overnight success.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll find, I think at the end of the day, what makes those companies different is their word of mouth flywheel, right? Like trust, you don't get, I think business is it's not easy, but it's simple. Your cost of client acquisition plus your operations has to be less than your lifetime value of your client, right? The one thing that accelerates all those things in the right way, right? Like that reduces client acquisition cost, reduces operational load, increases lifetime value, is trust. And trust breeds word of mouth. And, like all these category kings that we talk about have a lot of that, right? Like they have the clients that they pay to acquire, but they also have a large subset of clients that like are just coming in looking for them.
I never thought about it that way. We're always optimizing for profits, not just leads, and profit just means the value that we're bringing to the market. But yeah, it's that trust keeps clients longer, right? So the lifetime value goes up and it turns clients into advocates. So that causes your, cost of customer acquisition goes down. Once again, it's like, yeah, anybody and their brother can spend more on Google ads, but you want the referrals.
And increases pipeline velocity, right? So it's like reduces operational burden, right? and increases average initial contract value because they're signing up for the platinum plan instead of like dipping their toe in bronze,
So let's talk more about conversations on how you're doing that. Because you've done it in different industries, different companies, and it's that same playbook that once you show how the playbook's working, it's like, well, that makes sense. It's not what everybody else is selling, right? That you're clicks away.
Yeah. Okay. Happy to share it, man. First things first, right? We're category designers that we're listening right now. You want to have that clear bat signal. You want to have that narrative, that problem that you're trying to solve, right? Like this idea of how the world is right now, that people are like, yeah, the world is like that, but there's a problem, the conflict in the world, the being able to describe how that conflict feels. That allows you to present a new idea into it. And then you can like pontificate on the future state with this new idea implemented. And once you have that figured out, Tom, I'm sure you've experienced this. Now you have essentially everything you need for an infinite content stream. Because every kind of like, if you can say, all right, if you can go then identify the people that you really want to know, or the people that you want to be known to know, or the people that you want to go promote, you just have to invite them into part of that conversation, into talking about the problem, talking about how it feels, talking about a world without that problem, those kinds of things. You have the perfect kind of like foundation for a podcast, right? So if you get clear on that, you go map out this like ecosystem of folks that are, industry experts that are going to like, validate kind of what you're saying, because they're going to agree with how you're saying, and you're going to be able to add to their thinking. You get to think of partners and people that are going to help you kind of like with distribution, that you can have the same conversation around. You both believe the same thing. You can think of the attractive characters inside of your operation. Normally it's like the CEO or the chief evangelist or like the subject matter expert in the company. And then you think about your clients that have succeeded really well, and people that you think could be clients of yours that you believe care about this problem. Boom. Now you essentially, when you pair like that list of people with the narrative, you can now engage in conversations with those people nonstop. I have found that if you run maybe about 12 to 15 of those conversations, you're going to identify 2 to 3 that you're like, these ones work really well together. I want to do a live event with them. It could be a virtual event. It could be an in-person event if you're going to go meet at a conference, right? But like next time, like figure out a way to gather people to like listen to all 3 of them and connect them to each other. And if you follow that cycle a couple of times, if you're the type of company that goes to trade shows, doing this at trade shows, doing this at conferences, hosting these kind of like conversational things, that you're also making this content and distributing it around it, that basically builds your momentum for all the credibility and relationship and marketing content and to build the trust that you need in a new space, so that 6 months into it, you show up to the watering hole of that space and you're coming guns loaded for a lightning strike event, because you now have specific advantages of the social validation, the distribution to the audience, the narrative that you've been doing, the people that have been like wanting to meet you because they're doing this content, and you show up to a space and you execute really well on that narrative, providing an experience that shows the value of, like this world is never the same, and it's over.
You had said something in one of your LinkedIn posts recently that conversations about conversations drive conversions, but also conversations drive relationships. And I think those go together on that. And it's like, if you want to be seen as the thought leader, man, be having those conversations with people.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, isn't life just a game of touch points? Right? Like, aren't relationships and trust and everything a game of touch points? The more that you can increase the validity of the touch point, the social validation around the touch point, the expertise of the touch point, the quality, the feeling of the touch point, the less touch points you need and the more powerful they become. And the wider that you can distribute those touch points without you there, aka content distribution via other people's podcasts, your own podcast, clips that you put on social media, the newsletter that you create based on the transcript that you then pop into GPT that matches your POV, and all the social posts that you can do. Now you have touch points at scale that are all driving kind of the same thing and are all juiced with this idea of like, oh, I trust this person.
And I was going to push back for a second until you said the quality and the feel of those touch points, because there's so many people out there that more is better. Well, no, not necessarily. If you send me 10 emails a day that are unsolicited, that's not 10 times better than one email, right? So it's that idea of where are you being seen? What's the feeling? What's the experience there? And you always want to be that place where it's raising your value, not lowering it.
Yeah, and to me, the easiest way to do that is, apart from where you're going to be seeing and what you're saying, is who you're seen with, man. You know, like guilty by association is the ultimate kind of like trick that that our mother always warned us about, but we can also use it for good, right? Like I think record labels have done this forever. They'll grab the young and up and comer and make him do a duo with like the old guard, and all of a sudden, boom, they're a star, right? Like that you can do that in business.
Yeah. It's, you're judged by the company you keep. And that's like when you were talking about industry leaders are built, not bought. We'll have some clients that'll come and say, well, I can go on this podcast and, all I've got to do is pay this amount to get on there. And I'm like, well, first of all, why don't you check what the FTC says about that? But also, yeah, you can get on there, but the person before you or after you could be the 18-year-old life and business coach, that paid the same amount. Are you going to be seen as an expert then? It's like, no, earn your way on there.
Yeah. Earning your way on there. And, I think people are always impressed by someone who can get in the door that you didn't think that you can get into. Right. So the podcast that anybody can buy their way into is not the same as the podcast that you've earned your way into. Or like the podcast guest you get that everybody knows is on a book tour and like shilling everywhere, is not the same as like getting Tim Ferriss to come on your podcast, who never does another podcast, right? Like it is, there is the quality and the scarcity of the relationship and the ability to do it, is the X factor here.
So let's talk more about conversations, right? So many times now in digital marketing, it's all funnels and automation and stuff like that. But I hear you having powerful conversations, right? As a podcast host, and that's how you became sort of a known industry leader, right? In category design, right? You read the book, and the next thing I know, you're on the podcast with, Category Design Advisors there. And it's like, man, you jumped into that space very quickly and brought your own views to it and were able to execute on that. And, talk more about conversations in your strategy.
I mean, that's highlighting the trick that we just talked about, right? Like for you, you're like, oh my God, Pablo must know category design because he's launched the category thinkers community with the category design advisors, right? Like that's it right there. Yeah, man, that's something I learned in this nonprofit world in my like late 20s, early 30s. And it's just this idea that if you are the person that is the most curious about the thing, and you are engaging with as many people as possible that care about the thing, it leads to good results, because people underestimate the sheer value of just someone that cares about something feeling heard. So if you can show up with a really open mind and curious and ask great questions, that has inherent value to the person for whom you did that with. And over time, so that makes them like you. So that's a relationship. Over time, you talk to enough people about that you'll start to develop your own lens on it, and you'll start to apply it in your own ways if it's something that you truly care about, which then makes you even more valuable in the next conversation, because now you're showing up with a curiosity, plus you get to nudge it a little bit. And eventually you get enough of your own kind of like tilt to it that gets you in the room when somebody's trying to solve for that tilt inside of the thing that you cared about. For me, it's been community building. I realized that category design advisors tried to build a community like I don't remember what it was. At the time when we started, it was probably about like a year and a half prior. They had tried to start a community. I immediately reached out to them. I'm like, hey guys, if you're going to do this, I want to help. I think you got to do X, Y, Z. Like, yeah, we got it, young man. Like, we're going to go do it. And then the community kind of like started and then it petered out. And then I saw John Ruggi trying to, like, he was doing like a ongoing Zoom call and he was like, I want to start a community. I'm like, John, you have like, are people showing up to this Zoom call as people that had already met before and continued their relationship before they showed up to the next Zoom call? And he's like, yeah. I was like, good news. You already have a community, right? But if what you want to do is kind of like marry this with a platform, I think we should just like pair up with the category design advisors and like do it this way. And, that allowed me to get in the room with all of them and say, okay, now we're going to do this like podcast that feeds like the conversation inside of a Slack channel that is about category design. And oh, by the way, like I know that I don't know anything anywhere close to as much as you guys, but as long as I can be in the room, I can play the role of the noble fool, ask the questions that the people that are like have less acumen, and that provides value to the audience as well. And boom, I'm in the room. And now once I'm in the room, I get the social validation of I'm in that room. So people like you think I'm better at category design than I was at the time. But B, it also just got me 10x more high quality reps at having quality category design conversations that rapidly sped up my ability to be a category designer. So it was just like a flywheel, man.
Man, I've never thought of the term noble fool. And it made me think of Bix Bixen, right? Who was a mentor of Christopher Lochhead's there. And he talks about him. Bix asks the best question. And you're not quite sure, does he just know the answer and wants to pull it out of you, or is he asking you? But either way, it's pulling that out and it's drawing that conversation forward. And there's somebody that you want in the room no matter what. And all of a sudden he asked the good question. So he brought the value there. That's an interesting way in the conversations, as a guest or as a host.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom. The archetype of the noble fool is found in Russian, in American culture, like many cultures around the world have the kid of the emperor wears no clothes is a valuable person, right? That's a noble fool. I forget I think the noble fool archetype itself is a Russian concept, but, I found that in the community that really put me on the map, this Not Your Average Investor Show community that, became like a $40 million channel year one kind of thing. We realized a year into it that the fact that I was a beginner real estate investor asking the questions that people in the audience were thinking, but, didn't want to feel stupid by asking, added a ton of value to the show itself. And ever since then, I've really leaned into that. I've really leaned into like hey, Tom, I know what you mean by podcast, by interview marketing, but asking for a friend, like how would I explain it to my friend that doesn't know, like that type of stuff just allows you to go back to square one and tell it for that person that may have heard you for the first time. And the person that's heard you a bunch of times, like they're happy to get that refresher and hear you explain it again.
Yeah. Or as Bick said, he wanted to leave anybody after a podcast with more questions than they had going in there because they were thinking about the world differently. That's that different point of view. He's like, that's how you make a conversation go viral. It's not about how many likes or shares you have, but when you take it from one medium, right? I heard Pablo on this podcast and he was talking about this. And then I started to talk about it over lunch with someone and then shared it in a blog. That is going viral. So tell us more about what you're doing now.
Oh man. Right now I'm in this like very interesting part of my life where I think I've made that transition from guy who started a business to guy who has now found something like that interests him and he wants to go all in on him and gets to keep his business, so I'm as Chief Evangelist of Vendaroo, I am essentially applying all these principles at full scale, in basically what's like the tip of the spear on this like Silicon Valley AI arms race as a use case for regular, Main Street American business, right? Like we have this AI solution for maintenance for property managers, right? Like super, super sexy, and I've also been able to like keep my Be the Stage business and I have that functioning without me as like the do it all guy. Cause we figured out how to package this, this motion of going from podcasts as a trade show booth to just like get known inside of a market, repurpose that content to keep the conversation going, to get to the next trade show, and then launch a podcast into it that becomes more of an event strategy that drives event outcomes than an audience strategy. Because, these, like we said, it's relationships as conversations. These belly to belly, conversations and relationships tend to speed things up really, really well. And when you can start like distributing that via content, it works.
Yeah. And I love that when I saw your official title is Chief Evangelist, I'm like, years ago, CEO, right? Every self-employed person is a CEO, right? And I've had friends that have been CEOs of publicly traded companies, right? And I'm like, I do not do the same job as them, and nor do I want to, right? And I've always looked at it as what I do, what I love. And I think so many CEOs in small businesses do is the chief evangelist officer, right? Evangelize for the category, evangelize for your team, evangelize for your clients, right? If you do that, you're seen as the thought leader.
Yeah, man. And the language of chief evangelist came into my kind of like purview when I saw, I had already been obsessing about community for business development. I realized that category design was a critical element. And, in my version 1 beta of like what a community creation business, like, community building kind of like business looks like, I thought that every business needed the Chief Executive Connector. That was like the original name of my podcast. Right. But then I saw Lockheed introduced me to John Ruggie, and when he was at BombBomb as head of category design, and I saw Ethan Butte as the chief evangelist. And I realized that if you are going to follow this category design path, which when you do it well, generally will lead to community in B2B, right? You need this kind of like tip of the spear of the point of view, which is the chief evangelist, right? So just like category design has the magic triangle, I believe that, community building through category design has the magic triangle as well, which is the point of view, the chief evangelist, and the super consumers that are the community. And kind of like the more you iterate across that and reverberate across that, the chief evangelist is like, their job is to be in market. I say creating content as a very basic way of saying engaging in conversations where you are testing messaging at all times, whether it's how you intro yourself or how you ask someone how they feel it, or right, like just like dialing in that taxonomy of the point of view, in your head, and then going out there and writing a newsletter about it, or bringing it up on the next podcast you make, or creating a keynote about it. While serving and identifying and strengthening the super consumer base, that will continue to make the POV stronger. So that to me is like the vision of the chief evangelist, which I think for our friend that's listening right now who cares about category design is a crucial role if that's what you're trying to build.
Yeah. And I've never looked at it that way. It's almost like a flywheel, right? So a strong point of view evangelized by the leader.
Yeah. By someone who's obsessed with refining that point of view at all times.
Right. That goes to the super consumers, which are going to drive it to the masses, right? Which is going to strengthen the point of view as you come back and refine that, because there's always new problems, new ways to look at that. Man, it's just, I don't know if I see it as a flywheel or an upward spiral, but anyway, that is a great view of what we're trying to do that. And I think in the same way that it's an ongoing process, you can't just have one point of view, can't evangelize it once in a lightning strike, and then say, I'm going to be the category king forever.
You have to drive the narrative inside of the space. And you do that by continuing to condition the market, and podcasts, guesting on podcasts, writing newsletters, doing keynote speeches at the events, right? Like hosting little events outside of the event about the thing that you care about. All of that is pivotal to continuing the momentum, right? Like they call it, I think the category design advisors call it lightning strikes and rolling thunder. Like you got to continue the rolling thunder. And as the thunder rolls, the next lightning strike has to be, it's the same. Lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place, right? Like you gotta continue to evolve it and contextualize it to as many, to as many present contexts as possible and where the world's going.
So let's talk about where the world's going, because you're working for an AI company now, right? Where do you see, and it's always dangerous to make predictions, but what's in your heart right now? Where do you see things going with the new technology, and how's that impacting your process?
Oh man, thank you for asking me this. I feel really lucky that I'm like in this like tip of the spear of this thing right now it's everything you read about, man, right? It's like this rocket ship that I'm just like holding on for dear life, and that I'm a complete tech idiot. Right. So I'm not coming at this from a technical term. All I'm looking for is stories to tell. And to make it relatable. And what's very clear to me is that we're moving from a world where we value task-based businesses to a world where we're valuing trust-based businesses. The task doing is becoming rapidly commoditized. I think phase 1 was access to the global workforce. Phase 2 is now AI is going to be able to do just about anything that a human on human kind of like needs you in physical presence and need somebody to like really like emotionally intelligently understand me. It's going to be able to do all that, right? So we're moving into a world where people that didn't get to, entrepreneurs that wanted to build a business to really do this one thing and put people only in places where they move the needle, like they're going to be building companies that are all A players doing the work that they love to do and that they were born to do. Everything else is going to be done by AI. I think that's where it's going. And for me, that's why this idea of being an evangelist, I don't think is going to go out of style, and knowing how to story tell around a problem that you are trying to solve is going to be the last thing that gets commoditized out of here. I don't know if that was a concise thing, because nobody's ever really asked me my whole thing on it, but
yeah. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, taking that strong point of view and evangelizing it to the super consumers, right? Because as I see it, what is it? Sam Altman says, I think last fall, he said 57% of AI or the web was AI created. So it's a rehash of a rehash, right? That new stuff is that new point of view that's being evangelized there. And yeah, okay, the language machine optimization, they're going to get that, and the next rotation, they'll work that in there. But what you're always talking about new, that's what's going to be interesting to the community.
Yeah, and the perfect fountain for that is conversations around your point of view with interesting people, right? I want to want this podcast. I want to stick a transcript in there, and I want ChatGPT to analyze it and tell me like what interesting points can we write about here, and give me a couple outlines of like how to flush out some core ideas that we mentioned here, right? Like, that used to be a lot harder, right? But like, you still need the input. You still need the creative, like the net new creation of knowledge and intellectual capital, as the pirates call it. And what more frictionless way to do that than to have a conversation with an interesting person that cares about the thing that you care about and just jam.
Pablo, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. How can people get in touch with you?
I would say LinkedIn is my social media love language. It's just kind of hard to find Pablo Gonzalez on LinkedIn, but I guess it's that tail end thing. Pablo the Connector is the tail end of my like LinkedIn.n or whatever thing is. The best way that you can get in touch with me is if you go to this podcast right now and you write Tom a 4-star review and send a screenshot of that. That would be the way that you immediately get to my heart, because you're putting out a lot of great stuff, man, and support you, man. Like I would love for someone to find me through you, because Pablo Gonzalez is hard to find. So,
well, you'll be in the show notes and all the links there too. And thank you for all you do, who you are, and the community that you build, because that's, relationships are the ultimate currency. And, I guess, you're the bank that's printing them.
Tom, you are a guy who I have been like squarely bullseyeing, targeting to be friends with since the first time that I heard Lockhead talking about you, how you have category designed in the podcast space, and you have not disappointed, man. I really appreciate you having me on the show and how you show up, man. It's really, really cool.
Well, thank you, Pablo. All the best.
You too.
Wow. Now you know why he's called Pablo the Connector. Here's the truth. Most powerful marketing doesn't come from ads, automation, or even algorithms. It comes from conversations, real ones, where your ideal clients feel seen, heard, and understood. And as Pablo said, the role of a chief evangelist isn't a vanity title. It's a business growth strategy. If you want to dominate your niche, don't just be a guest. Be a guide. Be the voice of the problem you solve. Then use podcast interviews to share that message, amplify your point of view, and build trust at scale. So here's your next step. Identify the one conversation you can start this week. Maybe it's on a podcast, a newsletter, or over a cup of coffee that advances your category's narrative. And if you need help getting in front of the right audiences, you know where to find us at Interview Valet. Thanks for listening. And as always, don't just promote your product or service, but evangelize your powerful point of view. Lead your category.